A young family moves into a massive Victorian house, thinking it would be the perfect place to raise their children. What they didn't know is that once you step into that house, it never lets you leave. And the maid they hired to help them settle in wasn't there to serve them. She was there to finish them. Before we get into this nightmare, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the horror stories. Now let me take you inside that house. The first night in that house is something I'll never forget. We had just moved in earlier that day, me, my husband David, our 2 children, and another baby on the way. On paper, it was everything we wanted. A big Victorian home on the edge of a quiet town in California, with enough room for the kids to grow up in. But from the moment we unlocked the door, the place felt wrong. The walls smelled faintly of smoke, even though nothing inside looked burned. Every step across the floorboards groaned like the house was alive and restless. Even the kids, who had been excited about picking their rooms, went quiet as they wandered through the halls. I was already 6 months pregnant and struggling to keep up, so David suggested we hire help. That's when Evelyn entered the picture. She answered a local ad, and the next morning she arrived at our door in a gray dress that looked a little too old-fashioned. Her hair was pinned so tightly it barely moved, and her face never broke into more than the faintest polite smile. She spoke quietly, almost formally, like someone who had been raised in another time. I wanted to be grateful, but something about her made me uneasy. She moved silently, almost too silently. The children avoided her gaze. Still, we were exhausted, and Evelyn seemed deficient. She stayed. That night, after dinner, David and I were sitting in the living room while the kids played on the floor. The baby monitor upstairs flickered with static. I didn't think much of it at first, until the static shaped itself into a sound. A woman's voice, humming, a slow lullaby. David and I locked eyes immediately. The kids were right there in front of us. Nobody should have been in that room. He shot up and bolted upstairs while I stared at the monitor, heart hammering. The camera feed showed the nursery, the crib, the rocking chair. And then for just a second, a dark outline moved across the wall. David opened the door on camera, and just like that, the shadow was gone. The children in the crib never stirred. I hurried up after him and nearly ran into Evelyn, who was stepping calmly out of the hallway. Her pale face looked exactly the same as always, composed, almost cold. "Is something wrong?" she asked in that soft voice. I wanted to scream at her, demand why she was anywhere near the nursery, but David beat me to it. "Did you hear that?" he snapped. Evelyn tilted her head, her expression flat. "Hear what?" "The humming," I said. My voice cracked when I said it. She blinked slowly, then shook her head. There was no humming. But when we went back downstairs, I swear I heard it one more time, faint and distant, like it was seeping from the walls. That same lullaby, sung in a voice that didn't belong to anyone in our family. By the second week, little things in the house began to change. At first it was almost laughable. Lights flickering, clocks stopping at random times, doors creaking open on their own. David brushed it off, blaming the wiring and the age of the house. But then it became harder to explain. One morning, as I walked down the main hallway, I stopped dead in my tracks. Every framed photo on the wall had been altered. In each one, our wedding, the kids' birthdays, family vacations, Evelyn was standing in the background, smiling faintly, staring straight into the camera. I grabbed the nearest frame and studied it with shaking hands. These photos were taken years before we even knew her. There was no way she could be in them. I showed David, but he laughed nervously, saying maybe the kids were playing a trick, swapping the pictures. I wanted to believe him, but when I asked the kids about it, my daughter frowned and whispered, "We don't like when she looks at us in the pictures." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house breathe, every floorboard shifting as if something walked back and forth. Around 3 in the morning, I heard slow footsteps in the hallway. I nudged David awake, but he mumbled and rolled over. So I got up. When I opened the bedroom door, the hallway was empty. The light from the upstairs lamp flickered once, then steadied. The air felt colder. I was about to step back inside when I noticed it, a single wet footprint on the wooden floor. Small, bare, and pointed toward the children's room. My chest tightened. I hurried to their door, swung it open, and nearly screamed. Evelyn was standing inside, in the dark, her back to me. My children were curled up in bed, wide awake, clutching each other in silence. Evelyn didn't turn around when I entered. "Why are you in here?" I demanded, louder than I meant to. She slowly turned her head toward me, her face pale and calm. "Children wander in their sleep," she said softly. "I was keeping them safe." Her explanation didn't make sense. Neither of them had moved from their beds. I grabbed my kids, pulling them close. Evelyn simply stepped past me and walked out of the room without another word, her shoes making no sound against the floor. That night, I sat up with the kids, rocking them until they finally fell asleep. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn hadn't gone to her own room. I could feel her standing somewhere in the house, listening, waiting. David never fully believed me about Evelyn or the house itself. He'd roll his eyes when I told him the photos had changed, or when I swore I heard footsteps outside our room at night. He was practical, stubborn. He wanted to fix everything with logic. But one night, the house decided it didn't care what he believed. It was just past midnight. I was half asleep when I heard water running in the bathroom down the hall. At first, I thought David had gotten up for a shower. But the sound went on, louder and louder, until it felt like the whole upstairs was flooding. I got up, padded barefoot to the door, and froze. The carpet outside the bathroom was soaked, water spreading across it in dark ripples. I pounded on the door. "David." No answer. Just the sound of rushing water. I grabbed the handle and pushed. The door resisted at first, as if something on the other side didn't want me in. When it finally gave way, a burst of water rushed out, soaking my legs. The bathroom light flickered wildly. Water sprayed from the faucet and the tub, cascading down the walls like a broken dam. And there, half submerged in the overflowing tub, was David. His body was twisted, his head tilted back unnaturally, his eyes wide open. But here's the thing, the water barely touched his mouth. His face was dry, his chest wasn't moving. It looked like he'd drowned in air. I screamed for Evelyn. I screamed for anyone. My children came running, crying as they clung to the doorframe. Evelyn appeared moments later, calm as ever, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "He's gone," she said softly. Not shocked, not panicked, just certain. I wanted to tear into her, to demand how she could be so composed. But I was too busy trying to shake David awake, my tears mixing with the spray of water. The lights buzzed overhead, the mirror cracked down the middle, and the house seemed to groan around us like it was satisfied. The police came within the hour. They examined David, took statements, and eventually told me what I already knew they'd say. It was an accident, a fall, a heart attack, something natural, something simple. I wanted to scream at them, tell them about the way the water fought against me at the door, about how his lungs were empty. But how could I? They would never believe me. When the officers finally left, the house felt quiet again. Too quiet. I tried to follow them out, but the front door wouldn't budge. It was locked, bolted, sealed. No matter how hard I pulled, it wouldn't move. I ran from door to door, window to window, but every lock jammed. Every frame refused to break. My phone had no signal. Neither did the kids. Even the landline gave nothing but dead static. That was the moment I realized the truth. We weren't just living in that house. We were trapped inside it. And Evelyn, standing silently in the corner of the living room with her pale hands folded, was watching me with the faintest smile, like she had been waiting for this moment all along. After David's death, the house felt heavier. The air itself seemed thicker, harder to breathe. The children clung to me constantly, and I couldn't blame them. Every time I blinked, I swore I saw Evelyn standing in a doorway or at the end of a hallway, just watching. She moved through the house like she belonged more than we did, cooking meals, tidying the children's toys, humming under her breath. Always humming. That same lullaby from the baby monitor. I started keeping a notebook, writing down everything I saw, everything that happened. It was the only thing keeping me sane, the only way to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. One afternoon, while searching for tools in the basement to try and pry open the windows, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small wooden door built into the far wall of the cellar, hidden behind a stack of rotting boxes. The handle was rusted, but when I pulled, it gave way with a long, metallic screech. The smell hit me first, damp, sour, like earth that had been shut away for years. I covered my nose and stepped inside. The space was cramped, more of a hidden chamber than a full room, and it was filled with things. Trunks stacked neatly, each one labeled with faded tags. I dragged one open with trembling hands. Inside were children's toys, a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing, a little wooden train, a doll with cracked porcelain skin. The next trunk held jewelry, wedding rings, lockets, bracelets. The next, clothes. Men's jackets, women's dresses, folded carefully as if waiting to be worn again. My stomach churned. None of it belonged to us. None of it should have been there. At the very bottom of the last trunk, I found something wrapped in oilcloth, an old leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed, edges brittle. The ink faded, but still legible. The entries were written in a shaky hand. The first ones described moving into the house, much like we had. Excitement. Relief at finding such a bargain. Then came notes about a maid, pale, quiet, helpful. Her name was Evelyn. The later entries turned frantic. They spoke of strange humming, of photos changing, of footsteps in the night. They described children disappearing, husbands falling ill, wives growing weak. Always the same pattern. The final entry chilled me so deeply I almost dropped the book. She is not a maid. She is the caretaker. She has been here for centuries. She takes what the house demands, and the house will never let you leave. If you read this, burn her before she takes everything. I slammed the book shut and nearly screamed when I heard a voice behind me. Do you need help down there? Evelyn's voice. Calm. So calm. I spun around. She was standing at the top of the cellar steps, her gray dress blending into the shadows. Her face was as blank as ever, but her eyes looked almost amused. I stuffed the journal under my shirt and forced a smile. No, just looking for a hammer. She tilted her head, studying me far too long before answering. Of course. Be careful, Mrs. Holloway. The cellar can be dangerous. Her footsteps retreated, slow and deliberate. I waited until I was sure she was gone before I let out the breath I'd been holding. I clutched the journal to my chest, my hands trembling. The trunks, the toys, the clothes, the warnings. This wasn't just our nightmare. This had happened before, many times. And every time, Evelyn had been there. After I found the journal, sleep became impossible. Every sound in the house set me on edge. The pipes groaning, the wind through the walls, the faint hum of Evelyn moving around at night. I kept the journal hidden under my mattress, rereading the last entry over and over. Burn her before she takes everything. But the house was ahead of me. It started with the children's whispers. They'd wake up crying, saying they could hear someone singing to them through the walls. They described it as a woman's voice, low and broken, like she had no breath left but was still trying to soothe them. I didn't need to ask who they meant. One night, I fell asleep with my daughter and son curled up against me. Exhaustion finally took me. When I woke, the room was empty. The sheets were cold. My heart nearly stopped. I tore through the upstairs hallway, calling their names until my throat burned. Every door slammed shut when I reached for it, as if the house itself was pushing me back. I grabbed the doorknob to their room, but it twisted violently in my hand, like someone was holding it from the other side. When I finally forced it open, the beds were empty. The blankets were neatly folded, tucked as if no child had ever slept there. Then I heard it, a muffled cry, my daughter's voice. It came from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the plaster and nearly sobbed. Their voices echoed around me, distant but clear. Mommy, help us, she's coming. I clawed at the wall until my nails split. I screamed until my throat tore. Evelyn appeared at the end of the hallway, her pale face serene. "You can't keep them safe," she said, her voice like a lullaby. "They already belong to me." Rage surged through me. I charged at her, ready to tear her apart with my bare hands, but the hallway stretched like elastic. No matter how fast I ran, she remained the same distance away, her smile never changing. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. Evelyn tilted her head, almost pitying me, before vanishing into the shadows. For hours I searched. I tore through the house, ripping up carpets, pulling at floorboards, hammering at the walls until my arms went numb. I screamed for my children until I could barely stand. My hands bled, my face streaked with tears. I found nothing, only the echo of their cries, growing fainter and fainter. By morning, I was barely conscious, but I refused to give up. I pressed the journal against my chest, whispering to myself, "I will get them back. I will not let her take them." I stumbled into the nursery and collapsed in the rocking chair, clutching one of their stuffed animals to my stomach. For a moment, I let myself break, sobbing into the fabric, my whole body shaking. But then I remembered what the journal said. The families before us hadn't survived because they hadn't fought back. I wasn't going to be another name in Evelyn's collection. I stood, wiping the tears and blood from my face. My body was weak, swollen from pregnancy, but my will was stronger than it had ever been. My children needed me, and I would burn the whole house to the ground if that's what it took. I whispered into the empty room, voice shaking but steady. "You will not take them. Not while I'm still breathing." And for the first time, I swore I heard Evelyn laugh. I barely slept after my children disappeared. Their voices echoed in my head every second. I knew if I gave in to fear, if I let myself break, I would lose them forever. The journal had mentioned one thing that stuck with me. Burn her before she takes everything. But how do you burn something that doesn't feel human? That doesn't die like the rest of us? For days, I carried the journal everywhere, studying every page, every symbol scrawled in the margins. It wasn't just a diary. It was a record of desperation, filled with half-finished rituals, drawings of circles, chants in broken Latin. Whoever wrote it had been trying to fight her. They failed. But maybe I could finish what they started. I tore the nursery apart, dragging furniture aside until I found chalk, candles, matches, anything I could use. My belly ached from the weight of the baby. My body screamed with exhaustion, but I forced myself on. That night, the house grew colder than I'd ever felt it. Frost formed on the windows. My breath hung in the air like smoke. And then I heard it, the lullaby, louder than ever, vibrating through the walls. The lights went out. I lit a single candle, the flame flickering wildly in the dark. And there she was, Evelyn, standing in the doorway of the nursery, her gray dress rippling though there was no wind. Her skin seemed stretched too tight, her eyes black and bottomless, her lips curled into a faint smile. "You're wasting your time," she whispered, her voice echoing twice, once as her own and once as something deeper, older. "The house has already taken your children. Soon it will take the one inside you." I clutched the journal with one hand and a rusted dagger I had found in the cellar with the other. My voice shook, but I forced the words out, reading the ritual scrawled in the book. Evelyn stepped closer, and as she did, the walls began to shift. Cracks split open in the plaster, revealing hands, pale, clawed hands, reaching out, grabbing at my dress, my hair, trying to drag me down. The voices of my children screamed inside the walls. I shouted the words louder, slicing my palm and pressing the blood to the blade. Evelyn hissed, her calm mask breaking at last. Her body flickered, her face splitting into something skeletal, hollow-eyed. "You cannot defy me," she shrieked. "Every family breaks. Every mother kneels." I raised the dagger high, blood dripping down the blade, and screamed back, "Not this one." With all my strength, I drove the blade into her chest. Her scream rattled the entire house. The walls convulsed, the ceiling cracked, furniture splintered. Evelyn's form twisted, collapsing into ash that scattered across the nursery floor. For a moment, silence. Then the walls shook violently, plaster raining down. A door slammed open on its own, the front door. The first time it had budged since we moved in. I ran. I didn't look back. I stumbled out into the cold night air, clutching my stomach, sobbing as the house roared behind me. In seconds, the entire structure collapsed inward, as though swallowed by the earth itself. I was free, but my children were gone. Days later, in the hospital, I lay weak and broken. Doctors and nurses moved around me, their words blurring together. My only comfort was the faint kicking of the baby inside me. Then, the doctor came in with the ultrasound. His face drained of color as he stared at the monitor. "You said you were pregnant with one child?" My heart sank. "Yes, one." He turned the screen toward me. Two shapes glowed in the grainy image. One moved normally, kicking, alive. The other lay still. But its eyes were wide open, staring right at me. And in the quiet of that hospital room, I swore I heard it. That same lullaby,